Good morning everyone! On this wonderful day today, I'm going to be making a table. I found myself a very beautiful piece of birch, and it was all spalted. Upon inspecting it closer, I noticed that it had a face on it, and it looked like a fiery face. So I started off cutting all the pieces to size. I understand that I ended up with excess as you see here, but that's just in case things fail. And also, this excess is actually what I used to make the epoxy cutting board from 2 weeks ago. Once done, I proceeded to soak the whole thing up in tung oil. I have used about 2 liters of it, or half a gallon for American friends out there. But then I realized that if wood is soaked in oil already, then you can't glue it well since it won't form a good bond compared to the exposed wood. So to remedy that, I proceeded to cut off the edges just a little bit in order to expose the wood and make sure that the glue ends up bonding really tightly. Cutting all soaked wood produced some weird and sticky sawdust. Not going to do that ever again, to be honest. So once all my pieces were ready, I proceeded to glue them up. I have never made a table before, and if I did, I would know that I probably should have used dowels or some means of joining the pieces together so they do not drift. Lucky for me, however, the whole piece did stay intact, mostly. However, the downside was that after 2 weeks, it was warped really badly. I do not know why it happened or what caused it to happen, but I have never worked with that much wood before, so maybe that is to be expected. If you guys do know, please do let me know. But since the whole piece was completely ruined and there was no way for me to plane it properly, I have decided to sand it all on every single side in preparation for submerging it into epoxy. Once it was all sanded, for good measure, I soaked the wood up in shellac just to make sure the coloring from epoxy doesn't stain the beautiful wood I was working with. I honestly have no idea what I'm doing here, but I'm hoping it will all work out in the end. And now it is time to prepare epoxy. I have used a total of 12 liters of epoxy on this table. Yeah, that is a lot of epoxy. I'll be honest, me mixing the colors the way you see me do here is just pure nonsense. Why did I even use green here? What the heck was I going for? I mixed red, mango, green, amber together. Green didn't even show up in the final product, by the way. Nor did red really. The whole thing just ended up looking amber, oddly enough. Then I started pouring, and this was when I realized that the wood started floating. The table was heavy, but it still floated, so I clamped it down. But the table was heavily warped, so it was not like I could clamp it down properly. I have tried to do the best that I could. Looking back on this now, I think I should have allowed more of the wood to stick out a little bit, and then I could have just sanded it down to be smooth, right? Or I should have just made the colors of the epoxy less thick, so then if it's fully submerged, you could still see the beautiful wood. There are a lot of things that I could have improved on. Well, you live and learn. I will do better next time. I left it outside to cure for 3 days, and after 3 very long days, my beautiful tabletop was ready. It was time to yank it out of the mold, and this is where I saw a lot of my mistakes too. In the future, I'm going to be a little bit more careful in making molds because I'll let some of the silicone drip on top of the mold, and when I started pouring it, I actually noticed that silicone got stuck to the bottom of my table, thus making it look very unsightly. Now that the top was completed, it was time to use my brand new fast tool Mitre Saw to cut the ends off. I cut off a lot more wood than I originally intended to cut, but that was necessary I think, since the pieces I cut off were very unsightly. The saw did an amazing job at cutting, to the point where the edges were so sharp they actually sliced my finger and made me bleed quite a lot when I tried to lift the tabletop. Not to mention, the top weighed an impressive 70 pounds. So it was time for me to round the ends until they were smooth, and that's what I did. On the bottom I gave it a nice bevel to make carrying easy, and on the top I made the corners rounded. This produced too much epoxy shavings. If you guys know how to prevent shavings from flying all over the place, please do let me know. It was a total disaster, and I had to run and buy a leaf blower in order to blow most of the epoxy away. We had a mini epoxy shavings tornado. And we're almost there. I sanded the bottom of the table starting from 100 grit all the way up to 1000 grit. Main reason why I started with such low grit is so I can remove the silicone stuck to the bottom of the table. There was a lot of it stuck, and in the future I will be more careful when making molds. For the top, I started sanding it at 800 grit and going all the way up to 7000 grit. I didn't want to sand the top, but my router somehow ended up leaving a scratch on my tabletop, and it was too unsightly to leave as is. So I spent 6 hours sanding the whole tabletop. My fingers wouldn't stop vibrating the whole next day, it hurt so much. So if you guys have any ideas on how to stop fingers hurting from excessive sanding, please do let me know. And now that the whole tabletop was ready, the last step was to install legs. The intent for this table was to become a board game table, so we needed it to be as high as possible. Thus, the legs are high. I put the inserts in, screwed in the legs, and realized the whole thing weighs 80 pounds. I get my wife to help me flip it over and proceed to cover every part of the table that's not legs in good quantity of Odis oil. And voila! The table was ready. I have to say, I'm extremely proud with how it turned out, and I've learned tremendous amount of stuff by doing this project. If I could fix something, I would probably use less pigment for epoxy, or route in enclosed space in order to make sure that the shavings don't fly everywhere, or attach pieces of the table with joints like domino or dowel joints, or not leave it outside for 3 days so no flies get embedded inside of it, or make sure that the pieces are dry enough so they do not warp, or try not to use 12 liters of epoxy and instead maybe make do with 6. The table was way too heavy. 80 pounds is too much for such a small table. As you see, there are a lot of things I could improve on. A lot of things were learned, however. If you guys enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed making it, please consider subscribing and maybe leaving a like. I try to release videos every Saturday morning. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next week. Bye bye!